Usually when I talk about the afterlife, there's this expectation of profound mystery, like stepping into a really thick fog.
Right, yeah.
You might have some vague cultural ideas, pearly gates, reincarnation, becoming one with the universe. But essentially, it's treated as this unpredictable void. You just have to wait and see what happens when the fog clears.
It's the ultimate unknown. And honestly, because it's unknown, I think people often find it comforting to leave it vague.
Oh, totally.
There's a certain solace in the idea that whatever comes next is just, well, beyond our mortal comprehension. It kind of relieves us of the responsibility of trying to map it out.
Yeah, but we are stepping completely out of that fog today. We're looking at a navigational chart that is, frankly, startlingly precise.
Very precise.
Today we're exploring a translated text from March 19th, 2007. It's titled How to Predict Your Own Afterlife, authored by someone known as Deformed Celestial. And for you, the listener, the mission of this deep dive is to unpack this highly specific, very rule-based spiritual framework. It's basically a manifesto claiming you can calculate exactly where your soul is going to end up, based entirely on the current state of your consciousness.
And, the author doesn't present this as just some fun thought experiment.
No, not at all.
The text positions itself as a meticulous, exact, and strictly scientific manual. It's all based entirely on cause and effect reasoning. It really attempts to strip away all the mysticism we usually associate with life after death.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because I'm trying to wrap my head around how this author claims we can even begin to predict something as monumental as life after death. To build a mechanical rulebook for the soul, you have to establish some kind of foundational physics first, right?
Exactly. And the author grounds the entire philosophy in the natural progression of time and biology. The argument is super straightforward. If you see a pregnant woman, you don't have to guess what happens next.
Right. You observe she's conceiving life, so a baby is coming.
Yes. And furthermore, you know that baby will inevitably transition from childhood to adolescence, to youth, to middle age, and finally to old age.
It's a guaranteed trajectory based on a current physical state. The text also uses seasons as an analogy, right? Like if it's spring, summer is inevitably next.
Right.
Followed by fall and winter. You don't need psychic abilities to predict summer. You just have to accurately recognize that you are currently in spring.
That is the absolute crux of the text's entire argument. As long as we can accurately identify our current situation, we can predict the next phase.
Okay.
But when it comes to the afterlife, Deformed Celestial argues you can't just look at your physical body or your material circumstances. You have to examine what the text calls the non-material structural state of your life. And that's life with a capital L, I-F-E.
I want to pause on that phrase for a second, the non-material structural state, because it implies that consciousness isn't just like a fleeting thought or a mood. It has architecture.
Yes, it has weight and shape.
Right. And the author tells this incredibly vivid story to illustrate how this architecture actually traps us. It takes place in the Yuanyang Terraces in Yunnan, China.
Oh yeah, this is a great example.
So Deformed Celestial is visiting these terraced fields alongside someone named Foshan Celestial.
And for context, those terraced fields are visually stunning, but the physical labor required to maintain them day in and day out is notoriously grueling. It's a very, very hard existence.
Right. So they go deep into this village and they observe these elderly Hani people living very labor-intensive lives. And the author asks Foshan Celestial what seems to me like a very logical, empathetic question.
Which is?
He says something like, these elderly people have suffered in this valley throughout their lifetimes. Will they continue to be here in their afterlives? They should leave this valley.
Right, which is a natural human response. When you see someone enduring a lifetime of hardship, you hope whatever comes next offers them some release.
Or at least a change of scenery.
Exactly.
But Foshan Celestial's answer completely rejects that hope. He says, yes, they will continue to reincarnate right here in this exact same valley.
It's pretty harsh.
And his reasoning is that they have no other place or world in their consciousness. Unless they actively desire to leave the valley and put in the effort to learn about the outside world, they are physically and spiritually bound to reincarnate there forever.
Well, what's fascinating here is how that interaction redefines the very concept of consciousness. It's not just your internal monologue. The text is framing consciousness as a literal destination maker.
Yeah.
It's the blueprint of your reality. To an individual life, what is not currently residing in their consciousness simply does not exist as a possibility.
I keep thinking of it like a car's GPS system. You cannot navigate to a specific town if that town hasn't been downloaded into your map data.
That's a perfect way to put it.
If your internal map only contains the coordinates for one single farming valley, your GPS is just going to keep routing you back to that same valley, lifetime after lifetime, because it doesn't know any other roads exist.
The geographical limitation of the mind becomes the literal geographical limitation of the soul. The author actually brings in Western philosophy to anchor this mechanic, quoting René Descartes' famous maxim, "I think, therefore I am."
Okay, I actually have to push back on the author's use of Descartes here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, taking "I think, therefore I am" and using it as a reincarnation mechanic feels like a massive leap. I mean, Descartes was sitting by a fire trying to prove he wasn't being deceived by a demon. He was just trying to prove he merely existed.
Right.
But this text expands that to say, what I am thinking dictates the nature and location of my existence. How does the author justify turning an epistemological proof into a literal map-making tool?
It is a massive reinterpretation, for sure. But the author takes the premise that thought is the undeniable proof of existence and just stretches it to its absolute limits.
Yep.
If thought is the only thing that proves we exist, then the content of that thought must be the very fabric of that existence. Deformed Celestial claims this is why they have the authority to guide their followers, who are referred to as genuine celestials, to a specific paradise.
Because they aren't just teaching them a philosophy.
Exactly. They are actively programming their coordinates.
The text mentions constantly infusing the content of this paradise into the followers' minds. They're literally downloading the map data so the GPS can find it.
And the logic holds up within the text's own framework. The author argues that once the followers understand the specific details of this paradise, the lifestyles there, and crucially, once they clear away competing consciousnesses, it becomes an ironclad scientific certainty that they will go there. The thought constructs the destination.
So consciousness creates the map, but a map doesn't drive the car. If consciousness determines the available destinations, what actually decides the specific route you are forced to take? The text shifts from this broad philosophical concept of thinking your reality into existence to incredibly granular rules about actions.
Very granular.
It directs the reader to external texts like Life's 18 Qualities and the Supreme Book of Rewards and Punishments to audit their own internal state.
And this is where the mechanics of the system really show their teeth. Holding a nice thought in your head about a paradise just isn't enough if your daily actions contradict that frequency.
Right.
Your actions in the material world actively build and alter that non-material blueprint we were talking about earlier.
The text outlines 7 specific paths based on your actions, and they are uncompromising. For instance, the very first rule states that if you have killed many dogs, you will be a dog in your next life.
It refers to this as exact karma.
It operates on a strict eye for an eye spiritual physics, and it escalates rapidly. If you murder a person, you inevitably go to the hell world. And it's not just a generic hell. The text specifies you go to the inflamed layer or the frozen layer.
Right, very specific locations.
If you abuse life in general, you go to the netherworld. If you oppress the good, if you swindle, cheat, steal, and loot, you go to the animal world. You basically reap what you sow. But there is a rule about debt that I find particularly striking.
Oh, the unpaid debts rule?
Yeah. If you owe too many unpaid debts, you don't just get generalized bad karma. You are likely sent to the livestock world.
Consider the implications of that specific punishment, though. The transition to a beast of burden is framed as a literal way to pay off the physical labor or resources you unjustly extracted from others during your human life.
Wow, so you took someone else's energy without paying for it.
So now your physical energy will be harvested to balance the cosmic ledger.
That is intense. And to back this up, the text suddenly introduces the teachings of Jesus Christ. It states, and I'm quoting here, "Remember the warnings and teachings of Jesus Christ. If you leave a penny of unpaid debt, then you cannot leave the place where you owe it."
Yep.
I am really struggling with how the author synthesizes a deeply Eastern concept of karmic reincarnation with a Western theological figure to validate ending up in the livestock world.
It's a highly syncretic approach to theology. The author isn't interested in their religious dogma separating East and West. They're mining these various traditions for what they view as universal laws of physics.
Ah, okay.
They treat Jesus and Buddha not as religious deities to be worshipped, but as ancient physicists who understood the structural mechanics of the soul. A penny of debt is a structural anchor, regardless of which prophet pointed it out.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
You know,
Out of all these rules, murderers going to the frozen lair, thieves becoming animals, There is one rule that feels like a complete non sequitur.
The bird rule.
Yes. Rule number 5 states, if you love freedom but are still ignorant, then you will be a bird. Wait, a bird.
Yep.
How does human ignorance translate to growing wings and feathers in the afterlife?
I know, it sounds poetic on the surface. But within the logic of the text, it's a structural inevitability. To explain why our actions and desires dictate our next physical form, the author grounds all of this in the teachings of a figure named Kyankun Celestial.
Okay.
Kyankun Celestial uses the analogy of fruits and flowers. When we look at a garden, we have to ask why an apple, a banana, and a rose look so vastly different from one another.
Well, in biological terms, they look different because they have different DNA. They have different internal cellular structures that dictate their outward appearance.
Exactly. So applying that to the spiritual framework, the reason lies in the structures of their lives. Their different internal, non-material structures create the differences in their physical entities.
Oh, I see.
So your actions, your desires, and your flaws, like desiring freedom while remaining ignorant, literally mutate the structural DNA of your soul.
Because a bird is the ultimate physical expression of freedom, of flight, but it operates on instinct rather than high intellectual consciousness.
Precisely. If your soul structure matches that exact frequency, you physically form into a bird.
So your form and your use in the next life are dictated entirely by the structure you build in this one. If you act like a parasite by constantly stealing from people, your soul's structure becomes fundamentally parasitic.
Right.
Therefore, the universe has no choice but to place you in a body and an environment that matches a parasitic or subservient structure, leading you to the animal or livestock worlds.
You are quite literally building the vehicle you will be forced to drive in the afterlife. Piece by piece, action by action.
Which brings up a terrifying realization for anyone taking this text seriously. What happens when you read this and realize you've been building a terrible vehicle?
Oh, yeah.
Let's say you've got unpaid debts, you've been cruel to people, and you are mathematically headed for the frozen layer or the livestock world. How do you hack the system to fix your trajectory?
The author is brutally clear that simply forgetting your past wrongs does not erase them from your structure. Time does not heal these spiritual wounds. Ignorance of the damage you caused offers zero protection.
The text says, do not assume that if you forget something, it will just go away. I appreciate how strict that is. It demands absolute accountability.
Completely. You are required to actively investigate your own past. You have to comb through your personal history, and when you find a fault, you cannot let it go. You must learn to compensate.
And compensation in this framework is highly specific. It's not just sending a general, vague apology out into the universe. If you harmed animals, you must henceforth love them. If you harmed people, you must love people.
Right.
If you owe emotional debt, you are required to pay back emotion. Financial debt means you pay back the money. You have to actively ask for forgiveness from the specific life you abused.
It's a mandate for restorative justice on a structural level. You are balancing a cosmic ledger. And the text suggests going even further by generating merits according to the teachings of Buddha, specifically focusing on the practice of formless almsgiving.
Okay, I need to understand the mechanism behind that. Formless almsgiving means giving to others without the expectation of reward, without ego, without keeping a tally of how generous you are being.
Yes.
But why does that specific action erase generational debt? How does lacking ego physically alter the non-material structural state of your life?
Think of ego and selfishness as dense, heavy materials. Every time you act out of ego, you are adding lead to the structure of your soul. You're weighing it down.
Makes sense.
Formless almsgiving is the act of generating pure outward energy without attaching any strings back to yourself. Because there is no ego involved, it acts as a solvent. It dissolves the dense, calcified karma you've accumulated. The text promises that if your merits from this formless giving are substantial enough, that solvent can wash away faults and debts that have accumulated over multiple generations, making your structural state infinitely lighter.
There is a massive warning attached to this compensation phase, though.
Oh, definitely.
The text states that if you are sneaky, if you speak with voices dripping with sarcasm, if you talk nonsense or resort to sorcery, you don't just get a little bad karma. You are destined to become ghosts, demons, and monsters in the next life. Grouping sarcasm right alongside sorcery feels pretty extreme.
It really highlights how seriously the text evaluates the vibration of your consciousness. Sarcasm, sneakiness, and talking nonsense are all fundamental distortions of the truth. You're intentionally bending reality to mock or deceive.
So if you constantly distort truth in your daily interactions, your non-material structure becomes distorted. And a distorted soul naturally forms into a distorted, monstrous creature in the next realm. The sarcasm to goblin pipeline is real in this universe.
It absolutely is. But assuming you avoid becoming a monster and you successfully clear all your heavy debts through compensation, the text outlines the higher realms.
Yeah.
This is where the destination map expands beyond the mortal world. But it requires shedding more than just bad karma.
Right. Because we've established how to return to the mortal world as a human, which happens if you are kind, hardworking, love your family, love your culture, or if you simply have unfulfilled earthly wishes.
Yes, very standard good person stuff.
But ascending beyond humanity requires navigating a four-tiered system of heavens. And this is where I find the text's psychology truly challenging.
The higher realms demand an intense escalation of detachment. It's not just about being a good person anymore. It's about fundamentally dismantling what makes you human.
Let's look at the first tier, the 1,000-year world of heaven. To reach this, you must have all your mortal debts paid, and you must love freedom and joy. But you also have to completely eliminate the concepts of family, nation, culture, and religion from your consciousness. And I'm wrestling with the paradox here. Rule number 7 explicitly says that to be reborn as a good mortal human, you must deeply love your family, your culture, and your state. Why is loving your family a virtue on earth, but an anchor that prevents you from entering heaven?
It feels contradictory, I know.
Yeah.
But you have to look at it through the lens of structural weight. Loving your family and culture is a high, positive vibration for a material existence. It makes you a cooperative, beneficial human being.
Sure.
But love, in the human sense, is still an attachment. You are emotionally tethered to a specific group of people, a specific plot of land, a specific cultural identity.
Which goes right back to the Hani people in the valley. Their deep attachment to that specific valley and their way of life is exactly what keeps them reincarnating there.
Exactly. Breaking gravity requires dropping your anchors. To reach the 1,000-year world, you have to let go of those earthly tethers. You have to transcend human tribalism entirely. You cannot be bound by the concept of my family versus your family or my nation versus your nation.
So what's the second tier? The 10,000-year world of heaven. The requirement here is fascinatingly specific. If you often dream of flying and are in a constant state of joy without having sexual contact, this is your destination.
Yeah.
It demands joy completely divorced from physical, biological gratification.
And the progression continues upward. The third tier is the Elysium world, which you reach if you possess pure Buddha consciousness, which is a state of ultimate enlightenment and detachment.
And finally, the ultimate tier is the Celestial Islands continent of the Elysium world. This is the specific paradise the author is actively trying to guide their followers to.
The big one.
And the requirements to reach it are monumental. You must revere the greatest creator, revere life, walk the way of the creator, obtain supernatural powers, and crucially, you must be able to fancy an ideal world.
Now, notice the psychological shift that happens at this ultimate level. In the lower realms, your consciousness is reactive. Your anger, your greed, or your unpaid debts reactively shape you into animals or trap you in hell. Even as a good human, you are just reacting positively to your environment.
But at the Celestial Islands continent, you aren't reacting to reality anymore. You are generating it. Fancying an ideal world means your deliberate creative imagination is literally building the paradise you will inhabit. It brings the entire manifesto full circle back to the core premise.
That consciousness doesn't just navigate existence, it creates it.
Exactly.
It places a staggering amount of responsibility squarely on the individual. The text explicitly states, you are the one who knows best about what kind of non-material structure your life has achieved.
Yeah.
You cannot fake your structural density. You cannot lie to the universe about your attachments or your debts.
It completely removes all the traditional middlemen from spirituality. There is no priest, no gatekeeper, and no divine judge weighing your soul on a scale. Your soul weighs itself by the very nature of its structural composition.
Right.
And the author notes that if you read all these rules and you still don't know where you are going, then your spiritual perception hasn't opened yet, and you have serious internal work to do.
Which is why, whether you view this text as a literal mechanical map of the afterlife, or simply as a rigorous philosophical exercise, it demands a deeply uncomfortable audit of your own mind.
It forces you to look at the mundane details of your life. For you listening right now, What blueprint are you actively drafting every time you log onto social media and argue with a stranger?
Yeah.
What structure are you building every time you harbor a petty resentment or hold on to a financial debt you know you should pay?
What map are you building right now with your daily habits? Are you actively expanding your map by learning and compensating for your faults?
Mm.
Or are you just circling the same spiritual valley over and over again because it's the only thing you know?
Which brings up a very provocative thought to leave you with today. The core mechanism driving this entire manifesto is the rule that what is not in consciousness does not exist. If you don't know the town exists, your internal GPS physically cannot take you there.
It implies a terrifying self-imposed limitation on our own eternity.
If our eternal destination is strictly mathematically limited by the boundaries of what we can currently imagine and comprehend, what happens to the vast uncharted parts of the universe we haven't even conceptualized yet? Are we inadvertently shrinking our own afterlife possibilities simply by not dreaming big enough?
It's a heavy thought.
If we never push ourselves to learn about the outside world, to clear our debts, and to detach from our tribal instincts, do we trap ourselves in a valley of our own making forever? It is certainly something to evaluate the next time you catch yourself acting out of ignorance or holding on to a grudge.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating mechanics of the mind, the structural DNA of the soul, and the literal map of the afterlife. We will see you next time.